Welcome to the 12th and final episode of Around the World Low Cost Challenge. And on this episode you find us back in Glasgow, where we left off in the last flight when we landed on board the Aerosoft Airbus A330-300 in the livery of Canadian low-cost leisure airline Air Transat. And in this series I set myself the challenge to depart from London Luton on the 1st of June 2022, arriving back in London Luton on the 9th of June 2022, flying eastbound around the world, recreating real-world scheduled flights in the virtual world in prepared 3D version 4.5, but only flying low-cost airlines according to their schedule on the same week on June 2022. And today we finish off the series on board EasyJet. And as you can see, I've chosen to fly one of their Airbus A319s, which according to Flight Radar 24 is probably their most popular aircraft on this route between Glasgow and London Luton. But you will also see EasyJet use A320ceos and A320neos on this route as well. But the A319 was without a doubt the most popular aircraft type on the route when I checked it out on Flight Radar 24. Right, back to today's flight. In Sinbrief, we'll be departing Glasgow on runway 23, so in a southwesterly direction, before turning southeast over Ayrshire, heading in the direction of Cumbria in England, and then down through the Shires to Birmingham, where we'll be starting our descent to London Luton. Over the years I've probably flown this route more than 100 times in the real world, and while the flight is scheduled to take approximately 1 hour, it rarely takes that long. Anyway, back to the cockpit of this Aerosoft Airbus A319 Professional. As you can see, we are parked at the East Pier at Glasgow International Airport, which of course is the home of EasyJet and Loganair here at Glasgow. But I did depart this pier once on board a TUI Dreamliner from Glasgow across to Mexico, so other airlines do tend to use this low-cost East Pier wing from time to time. Right, with the air stairs pulling back, it's time to get this little Airbus en route to London Luton.
Bravo is cleared. Luton Airport test filed. Fly runway heading. Climb and maintain 3,500. Departure frequency is 119.1. Squawk 0774.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback. Locking gear.
United 16 using taxiway opening point 4 runway 23 using taxiway November Golf Alpha. United 162.
Departure check completed. Bypass pin inserted. Release parking brakes. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will. Set parking brakes. Tow truck disconnected. Bypass pin removed. Left is clear, right is clear.
Glasgow ground, AAC 43 Echo Bravo with information Papa. West taxi IFR. AAC 43 Echo Bravo, taxi heading point 4, runway 23, via taxiway Lima Golf Alpha. Contact tower on 118.8 when ready.
Giving way to the United Airlines Boeing 757-200 en route to Newark, New Jersey. We're now on our way to runway 23 here at Glasgow International, where I'm using the scenery from UK2000, and it's the Glasgow 2020 HD version. So at the time of editing this video in late February 2022, it was the latest version from Gary at UK2000. Those of you who follow the channel on a regular basis will know that I'm using Ultimate Traffic Live version 1, and you also know that I have a love-hate relationship with this product. So while the timing of the departure of the United 757 is pretty correct in a pre-pandemic world, I'm not sure United ever flew their old livery 757 on this route, instead using the livery that came across from their acquisition of Continental Airlines. The reason that I chose this route from Glasgow down to London Luton to finish this low-cost around the world challenge is quite simple, because EasyJet launched their services back in 1996 between Glasgow and Edinburgh and London Luton. And according to Wikipedia, they flew the Edinburgh Luton and the Glasgow Luton routes using leased 737-200s. I first flew on board EasyJet in 1998 between London Luton and Glasgow, and from memory this was on board a Boeing 737-300. And while I do know that Ryanair was there first, without a doubt in my mind EasyJet was the airline that launched low-cost airfares across Europe. And today they carry more passengers and link more European cities than British Airways. And while in 2022 their home remains London Luton Airport, their largest operation is without a doubt out of London Gatwick, where they are the largest airline at that particular airport. Back to today's flight, we'll be waiting while United 757 starts its journey across to Newark, New Jersey, and then we'll be underway to London Luton.
Clear for takeoff. Runway 23. United 162. East 4, Tree Echo Bravo. Hold short. Runway 23. Traffic is Boeing 757 on the runway. Bravo line up and wait. Runway 23.
Approaching 23.
Clear for takeoff. Runway 23. Easy 4, Tree Echo Bravo. Glasgow departure, Easy 4, Tree Echo Bravo is at 1,200, climbing 3,500. Easy 4, Tree Echo Bravo, Glasgow departure, Roger, altimeter 3000. Flight level 330, Easy 4, Tree Echo Bravo.
The body of water we're crossing over at the moment is called the Solway Firth, and it separates Dumfries and Galloway in southern Scotland with Cumbria in northern England. And from this position you can clearly see the Northern Irish coastline just across the Irish Sea as well. And as we leave Scotland behind us, we're climbing to flight level 330 or 33,000 feet. And this would be our final cruising altitude for our flight between Glasgow and London Luton today. And I have absolutely no idea why the flight simulator was giving us some pretty erroneous climb altitude points during our climb to cruise on this flight. I tend to allow SimBrief to choose the cruising altitude, and I therefore assumed that I had inputted 330. However, I've got no idea why it was giving us an initial climb altitude of 3,500 feet on departure. I don't tend to read the SIDS that closely, and probably in the real world it would be something like 3,000 feet. But we all know that the default ATC within Prepared isn't that good, and therefore we all live with its imperfections.
477, climb light level 310.
I have some drink for you, Captain. Here you are.
As we reached our final cruise altitude on this flight down to London Luton, it gave me time to reflect on the journey that we've taken on this round the world low cost challenge. We departed London Luton on the 1st of June 2022 on board the Aerosoft Airbus A319 in the livery of Wizz Air Europe, on a flight across to Krakow in Poland. In Sector 2, we departed Krakow on board the PMDG 737-800 in the livery of Fly Dubai down to Dubai in the UAE. And then we departed Dubai in what would be the first of 3 virtual flights in the Aerosoft Airbus A320. Sector 3 being on board Indigo Airlines India from Dubai down to Mumbai, and then from Mumbai in India to Phuket in Thailand on board the Go First Go Air Airbus A320, before battling thunderstorms in the 5th sector from Phuket down to Singapore on board the AirAsia Airbus A320, again part of the Aerosoft Airbus Professional family. Sector 6 would take us to the halfway point in our round the world low cost challenge on board my favourite virtual aircraft, the Quality Wings 787-9 in the livery of low cost Singapore Airlines Scoot. Sector 6 would also be the first of 3 flights in a wide bodied aircraft in this challenge, and it would take us down under to Sydney. And because we were doing these flights in June, that meant winter in the southern hemisphere. We departed Sydney in Sector 7 on board the Quality Wings 787-8 in the livery of low-cost Australian airline Jetstar, and we flew northeast back into the northern hemisphere and summer, arriving in Honolulu, Hawaii the next morning. At nearly 11 hours, this would also be our longest sector in this round the world low cost challenge. And for me, no low cost round the world challenge would be complete without a flight in the king of low cost airlines, that of course being US low cost carrier Southwest. So I took the opportunity in Sector 7 to fly the awesome PMDG 737-800 with the scimitar wings in the livery of Southwest Airlines, from Hawaii across the Pacific to Los Angeles LAX. And at LAX is where I had a dilemma. Heading back to London Luton in the UK, do I fly south to Mexico or north to Canada? And for those of you who followed the series, you will know that I headed north to Canada on board the PMDG 737-700 in the livery of Canadian low-cost airline WestJet. Or are they a low-cost airline anymore? That is the question. So in Sector 9, I also chose not to fly to one of the major Canadian airports, instead choosing Edmonton in Alberta. And the reason I chose Edmonton, Alberta was very simple. I wanted to find a daytime flight in the schedule for June 2022 on board the true Canadian low-cost airline Flair. So in Sector 10, we went Trans-Canada on board the PMDG 737-800 in this pretty ugly livery. And arriving at Canada's largest international airport, that of course being Toronto Pearson, we battled even more thunderstorms. And according to the Air Transat June 2022 schedule, that set us up perfectly for our third and final wide-bodied long-haul flight back across Atlantic from Toronto to Glasgow in Scotland. And we made this overnight transatlantic flight on board the Aerosoft Airbus Professional A330-300 in the livery of Canadian low-cost leisure airline Air Transat, who link Toronto and Glasgow on a seasonal basis, flying the A330. And if you want to look back at any or all of those videos, as I made my way eastbound around the world from London Luton and back to London Luton, only flying low-cost airlines, you just have to look back at the last 11 videos on the channel. And I don't know about you guys, but I judge all of my flights in Flight Sim by the quality of the landing that I make. I know that it must sound ridiculous that we challenge ourselves in Flight Sim to only the last few percent of each flight. But the satisfaction of getting these complex study level aircraft on the ground is such a buzz. And during all 12 sectors on this round the world low cost challenge, some of my landings were better than others. For example, in Mumbai I struggled with smog and low visibility with an ILS that was clearly out of sync for the payware add-on scenery that I had installed. At LAX we battled with scenery that was at odds with the weather, and at Phuket in Thailand we were rewarded with some of the most beautiful scenery in Flight Sim. As we made our final approach to this island airport, in my opinion, my best approach was without a doubt into Dubai on board the PMDG 737-800 in the livery of UAE low-cost airline Fly Dubai. For some reason, I simply got it right during this nighttime approach. And without a doubt, I just have to look back to the first sector and the flight between London Luton and Krakow on board the Aerosoft Airbus A321 in the livery of Wizz Air Europe. I learnt very quickly that resting my hands on the throttle quadrant on final approach was not a good idea. But anyway, back to today's flight and the final sector in this round the world low cost challenge on board the Aerosoft Airbus A319 Professional in the livery of EasyJet. How will I fare on this final descent and approach into London Luton?
Turn right heading 170, easy, 4 Trees, Echo Bravo, watch.
Approaching 26.
$500. 400.
Glide slow. Glide slow.
100
Glide
above.
slow. Slow.
4 Trees, Echo Bravo, go around.
Minimum
Glide
100.
Go
slow.
around, acknowledge,
Glide slow.
going around, easy, 4 Trees, Echo Bravo. Over to 128.75, easy, 4 Trees, Echo Bravo, bye-bye.
Well, I suppose it was going to happen sometime, and the last flight in a round the world low cost challenge is probably as good a time as any to get a go around. So making a left hand turn to avoid overflying Luton town, which of course is normal procedure on a departure from runway 25 at London Luton. It will now take me about 10 minutes to set myself up for a second approach.
Continued approach, runway 25, easy, 4 Trees, Echo Bravo.
$500. 400.
Glide slow. Glide slow. Glide slow.
300.
Glide slow. Glide slow. Glide slow.
200.
Glide slow.
100.
Glide slow.
50.
Foxtrot Bravo Romeo.
50, 40, 30.
Short final.
Retard. 20. Retard. 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 Retard.
Romeo. Easy 4 Trees, Echo Bravo. Contact ground on 121.75.
Yep, probably not my best landing on this final sector. However, welcome back to London Luton, and we did it. We made it around the world eastbound on board only low-cost airlines. And we did it in the virtual world in prepared 3D version 4.5. And for those of you who missed the first episode, the scenery that I've got installed here for London Luton is from UK2000, and it's the latest HD version. And in my opinion, it is one of the nicest airports that Gary at UK2000 has ever produced. Just look at the quality of the old Britannia Airlines hangar that is now painted in EasyJet orange. And our arrival here at London Luton signifies the end of another flight, and in fact the end of this round the world low cost series. Next up will be a new 4-part series to round out 2022, and we're calling it Ultra Long Haul Specials, where the real Airbus pilot and I create 4 special ultra long haul flights in the virtual world, which in the real world were flown due to factors caused by the pandemic. So you know what to do if you want to follow the real Airbus pilot and I as we create real world flights in the virtual world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon if you wish to be notified of the next video when it is published. So as we pull up on stand here at London Luton, it's time to thank you very much for watching this video, and wherever you're flying in your virtual world, don't forget to fly safe.